Hello and welcome again. This is Margarita with the Digital Electronic Gold Coin Report. And you know that recently I was speaking about the importance of recognizing economic changes are sometimes extreme factors for people. And it is relevant to understand that those changes can really impact a person's lifestyle. Now, I'm going to update you on why I really did bring up some facets of a person's situation recently in a stream and why I didn't bring up too much detail, but that in this stream today, I'm going to elaborate a little more. But before I do that, I'm going to bring in some more light into the situation. Let me do that first and foremost. That requires that I get to the doorway. One moment. Opening the door sometimes does help a situation. You should do that once in a while. Now, we don't always need to actually literally open the door, but the reason I did that was to also metaphorically say that when we learn something, we also open the door because we open our minds to new information. Now, recently in a previous stream, I talked about yearly reminders for healthy living. And in those yearly reminders, I talked about open enrollment for Medicare, which is health care for people who are older and people who have specific vulnerabilities that requires the federal government to assist them. And in assisting them, that means that it's a safety net, which allows people to live healthy, hearty lives. We do that as a government in the United States of America. It is a democracy and a responsibility to make sure that everybody is a productive member of society. But what we do also as a society is we learn that the economic conditions change over the decades. And as they do change, they also teach us that we have to change as people in better understanding why we have to adjust as well. What do I mean by that? You're wondering. Well, when the original Social Security Act was passed, the economic conditions were not as they are now. We were not in a $40 trillion debt as a country. But we also didn't have the financial conditions of what we have now, which is cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. It wasn't as melded into the financial trading system as it has become. And even 10 years ago, such type of fiscal thinking would not have been thought of in the way that it is now. Having said that, though, some of the portions of our economy and the way that people are paid has still not adjusted itself for all of society. Here's an example. If you look at what I mentioned yesterday, that as of in one point in time statistic, which was February of 2026, there was a 48% increase in vegetable prices. That seems staggering. And some of you may have been wondering, I don't know about that, Margarita. That doesn't seem correct. But actually, that is true. And that is according to several different news outlets. Not only the large ones, the CBS, NBC, ABC, but also Bloomberg News. And you also want to consider the fact that when you're looking at what that means, there are some economic situations globally that are affecting those prices, which I won't get into the globality of that, what those are, because that is not the purpose of this particular stream. I wanted to talk, though, about to dovetail back to what my conversation was yesterday, which was healthy living. When we focus on our cognitive and when we're looking at statistical analysis, you can't just take a number and say, oh, those are just figures and they mean nothing. We can just ignore them. They're just percentages. In the context of what those percentages are, we have to really look at what do they mean for people and how people live. I mentioned Medicare enrollment and increases to healthcare in 2026. This is true. But also, if you take a typical person's healthcare, a typical person's Social Security, for example, which may average between 500 to 1,000, that's one thing. But let's take also a person who is getting, say, for example, 2,255. I'm just going to pick one out of a hat. $2,255. You're American citizen. They get a check in the mail or they get it direct deposited. They have a responsibility to pay bills. They are a modern American with modern responsibilities. And because of that, they also go to the grocery store. And as a family of one, now I'm going to walk you through what the average grocery bill is in 2026 for up to a family of 6. But I'm going to walk you through a family of 1 because I want you to really let this sink in for a minute. A family of 1, this person who is living as a safety net recipient, already retired through because this person no longer is able to exist in the economic contributing factors of the United States economy. So what they are is already receiving their Social Security wages. And when they go to the grocery store, their average bill is about $480 a month. Now, this is a below average amount. They must be going somewhere where they get really good discounts. Because in certain parts of the country, $480 may be about every 2 weeks. In some instances, $200 is every week. So you really want to put it in context. It really does depend on the store. It depends on the groceries they're buying. But I found an article which did say these are the averages. So I just wanted to walk you through that. That's about 21% of the person's dollars that they bring in. This is not adding any additional income that they may have. Now, 21%. They also are still a person who drives. And because of that, there's about fuel costs that are 30% of the 2255. Fuel costs have gone up. And this is verifiable. I double checked and triple checked prices. And that is about 30%. So with that added up, that is a 51% of the 2255, which this person brings in. I have not added yet healthcare or rent or a mortgage or any other miscellaneous, let alone any responsibilities the person may have that are their monthly bills. So this is essential you understand that. Let alone car insurance, let alone if they haven't paid off their car, then they have a car payment. And of course, rent on average is about $1,000. So where is that coming from? You have to really ask yourself, what is the expectation of society for the future? I wanted to leave you with that because if we really look at what prices are grocery wise for a family of two, it averages on the upper end $1,000. For a family of three on the upper end, $1,060. For a family of four on the upper end, $1,675. And for a family of five on the upper end, 1,520. And because a family of six, according to the article that I found, would be saving through coupons and such 220, excuse me, it is actually more. It is $2,200. So let's be realistic. What happens is the economy is dependent on quite a bit. So we really must ask ourselves, how are we as an economy prepared for the next generation who is currently contributing to society, for them to be prepared to have that safety net in those next years of their phases of their life? Is it properly prepared with that Bitcoin knowledge, that cryptocurrency technology, to be properly faceted, considering the calculations that go into the older calculations that have gone into place for the generations that are currently on the system that was developed many, many decades ago? How is that transition going to take place? And when? Not just from the financial aspect of the payments that are sent to people, but from the Medicare aspect of the responsibility that physicians have to care for people so that not only coverage doesn't get lost, but the medical records don't get destroyed. Not to mention the vaccination protocols do not get demolished in the process. These aren't existential questions. These are vital questions from one generation to another so that we can properly prepare not only healthcare professionals, but caregivers who need to be trained in what was, what is, and what will be, so that variances don't become outliers, but that we become aware of what had taken place so that information doesn't get destroyed for the sake of people thinking that it just doesn't have to be shared. If you want to look at what some of those corrections were that were fact checks from the previous stream, please feel free to do so. I think it's vital. If you don't want to look at the shorts, because the YouTube stream that I tried to do previously, it didn't want to go live when I tried to do that. I made little tiny shorts. I don't mean shorts that you wear, I mean shorts on YouTube. That's perfectly fine. I'll just tell you now that there were some errors in the stream yesterday, and I provided fact check corrections. I said that the healthcare program that had some discounts for medicines was part of the current presidential administration, and I called it the Trump healthcare. But I looked at it, at some of the information that I could gather, because my algorithm does not allow me to look at it for some reason. It's just the way technology is. What your algorithm prefers you look at, it allows you to see. And it appears as though it's called Trump RX. You can see that I'm not enrolled in it, which is why it doesn't allow me to look at it. And the other correction that I needed to make was important, and that is that when I was talking about the flu shot vaccinations, an error that I made was in trying to explain the H1N1 versus the H1N11. And I said H11N1, and then I erred in how I then said H1N11. So I wanted to make sure that you were aware that the current influenza flu vaccine that was approved by the CDC is actually the H3N2 vaccine. And those are the protocols that were approved because that is the only one that was thought to be one that the body can fend against, and the one that is most prevalent in the United States. I think it's relevant to know that when you look at what is out in the world, the reason that I started talking about H11N1, I don't want to scare anyone. It's just that I have read articles and I went back to look at what was the difference. It's that because since 2017 to 2022, there were 12 cases of H11N9, 2 cases of H11N3, and 6 cases of H11N2. And you're probably wondering, what is wrong with Margarita and why does she keep talking about the bird flu? Well, I was in Singapore when SARS first originated as a public notification. And when I flew back, we were notified as to what kind of symptoms we had, and we had to report back and observe ourselves for 2 weeks. So I know that it's important to be aware of what those kinds of notifications are. I didn't get any of those symptoms, thank goodness, but I do know that I have always been on alert as to what it means to have that protocol. And because clearly they reached out to us, and there were people that were with us during that week, that the person that I went to Singapore with, and I was there for 7 days in 2003, that communicated to us that within a week their entire school systems were closed and everything just changed. But the way that Singapore took lead throughout Asia to develop SARS-CoV-2 protocols is historic, but it is also monumental. And no one can ever take that from Singapore, let alone from understanding that Asia across the world does have pivotal knowledge as to the surveillance of what happens with avian flu. And it is important for anyone who lives in any community that has birds that have migratory patterns that travel throughout the world to understand how important it is to get vaccines that protect the human body from getting anything that could be transferred bird to bird, and understand what those vaccines are. So that's why I keep understanding it, because I did also receive the H1N1 vaccine when it was first available to humans in Southern California, when I lived in Southern California. Now I live in Northern California, but I live in an area where there are birds with migratory patterns that actually migrate all the way to South America. And so it is really important to understand what those responsibilities are. It's nothing to be scandalous about, but it's something to be aware of. Having said that, I hope that does clarify quite a bit. If you have any questions, you can always speak to your primary care physician or your healthcare provider in your own region, or read articles that are posted from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. From the Digital Electronic World Point Report, and yes, I am posting here live from headquarters. This is Margarita. Have a great day.